In early 2005, the town of Ponchatoula, Louisiana was traumatized when a local church was exposed conducting satanic worship, crimes against children, and animal sacrifices. At the center of this scandal was the church pastor, Louis LaMonica, whose horrific crimes took center stage throughout the nation after confessing to cult-like rituals involving as many as 24 young victims. Welcome to Exposed, Scandalous Files of the Elite, the Hosanna Church Cult Scandal. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Exposed, Scandalous Files of the Elite. I am your host, Jim Chapman. And before we get into today's episode, I got some shout outs that I want to make for some global celebrity Patreon members. And we're going to start out with Miss Jessica Tinsley Anderson. And let me tell y'all a little bit about Miss Jessica. Miss Jessica supports every single thing I do. Everything. All of the other podcasts that I host and co-host, of course, Bloody Angola with Woody Everton, Real Life Real Crime Daily with Woody Everton, Local Leaders, my podcast that I host about local family-owned businesses in Livingston Parish, Louisiana, and surrounding areas. She supports them all. She is an awesome human being. And I'll tell you what, she played an absolutely key role in the episode I'm going to bring you next week that you are absolutely not going to believe. All I'm going to tell you up front is it's going to be an in-studio interview regarding something we have already covered on Exposed. And that person will be here giving their firsthand account of their experience. That's all I'm going to tell you up front, but I will say that Miss Jessica Tinsley Anderson played a key role in getting me in touch with that person. So shout out, Jessica. I also want to shout out Miss Francine Fitting, who is a global celebrity on our Patreon page. Again, Miss Francine supports every single thing I do. Much love, Miss Francine. I appreciate you so much. You are awesome. So those are our two global celebrities for this week. And look, if you haven't looked into it yet, please look into the Patreon. Just a quick reminder, we have 3 tiers. Our first is a local celebrity tier. You're going to get commercial-free early releases for just $10 a month. That's $2.50 an episode. And you'll really be supporting what we do. For just a little bit more than that, $15 a month, you can be a national celebrity. You get those commercial-free early releases, but you also get bonus episodes. And we have one coming to you this week, this upcoming week, probably midweek. We'll drop that one on the Patreon. And you end up paying about $3.25 an episode for all of that. And our third tier is our global celebrity tier. And you get a ton of stuff with this tier. You get not only the commercial-free early releases, but you also get the bonus episodes. You get the shout-outs like you just heard. And if you'd like, I'll also give you a personal phone call and personally thank you for becoming a global celebrity. You get a custom welcome package and you get exclusive videos that you won't get on any other tier. One of those will be that interview we have coming up next week. So for all my global celebrities, I'm going to shoot you an email because I'm sending out that welcome package and I'm going to need to get some sizes from you, some shirt sizes. So that may give you a clue of what may be heading your way. Thank you so much to all of you. If you can't be a Patreon member, totally get it. Totally understand. The best way you can support us at that point is just to share the podcast on your social media. Leave us a review. That is huge. That is very important. So leave us a review wherever you listen And I can't tell you how much that helps for all the Patreon peeps that we have. We love you so much. Thank you for supporting us. Now let's get into today's episode. Before we dive in, I want to say, and I guess they would call this a trigger warning, this episode will disturb listeners in some cases. If you can't handle that type of content, you may not want to listen to this one. But it happened, it's real life, and I'm going to tell you all about it today. This particular case took place in Ponchatoula, Louisiana. And to kind of describe to you Ponchatoula, Louisiana, it's actually only about a half hour or so from where I'm recording right now. It's a very small town, a very tight-knit community. There's actually a famous strawberry festival that occurs every year in Ponchatoula. And what was going on there will absolutely shock you. So we'll start out in early 2005, just a few months before Hurricane Katrina hit and just devastated New Orleans and Ponchatoula and many other South Louisiana communities. And a woman in Ohio contacted an Ohio sheriff's office. Her name was Nicole Bernard. And Miss Bernard claimed she fled to Ohio with her child from Ponchatoula, Louisiana, after her child told a counselor that they had been abused at a church. Now, for a few weeks, Miss Bernard would keep calling back. She would just spontaneously hang up. She would call, give them a little bit of information, and say she had to go and hang up. She would not reveal names or even talk about specific incidents. The detective she was dealing with finally warmed up to her, or she warmed up to him enough to reveal some names. And one of those names was Louis LaMonica Jr. Now, this apparently got back to Louis LaMonica Jr., who was the reverend at that church, the Hosanna Church in Ponchatoula. And the very next day after she revealed his name, he walks into the sheriff's office at Livingston Parish, Louisiana. And he had quite a story to tell. So I'm going to give you a little bit of history on this guy. Now, his dad was also a pastor. As a matter of fact, he was a beloved pastor in the town of Ponchatoula at the Hosanna Church. In the church at the time that his dad ran it, and this was the decades leading up to the early 1980s, it was a large church. It actually had a congregation of 1,000 members, which is a lot for a small town like Ponchatoula. So his dad passes away, and Louis LaMonica Jr., who was previously pretty disinterested in being a church pastor, he decides to take over that flock. Over time, in what you would call maybe a slow leak, people start leaving the church for neighboring churches and congregations. Well, that left an extremely small church, to say the least. There was only 15 to 20 adults still left who claimed that church as their, what they called their spiritual home. And later on, people who did leave that church for neighboring congregations, they said that the reason that they left was Louis LaMonica Jr. was very erratic and very strange, and they just didn't feel comfortable. And churches rely a lot on visitors. They want visitors to join their church. So it didn't help in that respect either, because those people thought he was strange, and indeed, he was way more than strange, which we'll get into. Now, by the end of it, the small church had become well known in the area as a group of really weird people, and community members looked at it as sort of a cult. They had no idea how accurate they really were. So eventually, as that congregation shrunk to 15 or 20 members, they decided not to allow any new members into the church. So Louis LaMonica, as I told you, he walks into the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office the day after Nicole Bernard named him as the abuser. of her child when she was speaking with the Ohio Sheriff's Department, and he tells his story. And Stan Carpenter, who was the detective supervisor at that time in Livingston Parish, he said that Louis LaMonica didn't come to turn himself in. He just came in to talk with the sheriff's office in Livingston Parish. And LaMonica matter-of-factly told him of having sex with at least 2 boys from the time they were 4 until they were 12 or 13, as well as having sex with a dog. Stan Carpenter also said that Mr. LaMonica did not act as though he was confessing to those crimes. He was just trying to be, quote-unquote, helpful. And, of course, the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office did not let him just walk away. But during this discussion, this confession, if you will, he also implicated 8 other members of that church, and one was a deputy sheriff. He mentioned some cult-like rituals involving the rape of as many as 24 young victims, ranging from infants to teens, and those took place between 1999 and 2003. Those he accused at that time ranged from his wife to almost every other member in that church cult, including the children of his own. So police do their own investigating, and during this investigating, they find some very disturbing information. Pentagrams on the church floor. They discovered the accuracy of having sex with dogs and sacrificing of cats. The prosecutor in that case was actually quoted as saying he had been a prosecutor in rape cases and child molestation cases, but had never had a group accused of doing anything like that. So, of course, after all these confessions, LaMonica gets arrested, and 8 other people get arrested from that church. They were described as kind of central members of the ring, and all but one are held without bond. Even that tipster from Ohio, Nicole Bernard, was arrested on rape charges, along with her ex-husband, Trey Bernard. Now, during some of these interviews that they had with LaMonica, he made some insane claims. He claimed that he had drank cat's blood and poured it on the bodies of young victims, some of whom were his own children. And when the local police talked to other members of that church that they had arrested, they confirmed that. So, of course, they do their investigation. Eventually, this goes to court, and LaMonica takes the stand. And when it comes time to confess in front of a jury that he had done all these things as he admitted in his confessions, and they had the tapes, his whole story changed. He said to the jury that he falsely confessed to the child rape because he thought it would be the only way to get his wife and children back. Obviously, that's bullshit. And during that trial, he had been put on trial for 4 counts of aggravated rape of his sons when they were 11 or younger. He was also the second among 8 church members indicted on charges of molesting children to go on trial. So this involved a lot of people in that church. Also during the trial, church members revealed some wild incidents, including once shaving the head of LaMonica and calling him a pharaoh. Wait, fuck, this is all fucked up. So we're going to go over the facts of this case. I'm reading these straight from the court documents, and the facts discuss LaMonica. And LaMonica was the father of 2 sons, ML, who was born in 1986, and SL, who was born in 1990. At this time, it is 2006. At the time of the offenses, Louis LaMonica was the pastor of Hosanna Church, and that was in Tangipahoa Parish, which is Ponchatoula. The defendant's wife and his sons were all members of the church. In the late 1990s, Louis Mowbray became associate pastor of Hosanna Church. And in 2001, she became co-pastor of the church. Now, by 2003, Louis LaMonica's involvement in the church, including his involvement as a preacher, declined considerably. Lois, along with her husband, a guy by the name of Jesse Mowbray, and Louis LaMonica's wife, began handling the finances of that church. And according to LaMonica, Lois began to take over as the person running the church. In 2002, Louis LaMonica and his wife, they began having marital problems. In March of 2003, they separate, and Louis LaMonica actually begins living at the church. And for the next 2 years, he actually lived there. Now, in 2002, Dr. Milton Anderson, who was a psychiatrist, he starts treating Louis LaMonica's two boys on a regular basis for medication management and just kind of like general supportive therapy. The boys, the mom and dad are separated and they're getting therapy for this. Both of the boys were diagnosed with ADHD, anxiety, and Tourette's syndrome. Now, in March of 2005, LaMonica's estranged wife contacts Dr. Anderson and told him it was urgent that he sees those two boys. Over the course of the next two sessions, the two boys revealed to Dr. Anderson that for years they had been forced to have sex with adults and a very young girl and each other. One of the boys even had a stack of pictures he had drawn that are very graphic, illustrating the abuse that he and his brother had suffered. According to both boys, they were threatened by a church member to disclose to Dr. Anderson all of the sexual incidents that they were involved. And as a result of these sessions, Dr. Anderson contacts Child Protective Services, CPS. Now, an FBI special agent by the name of Thomas Tedder, who was working the case when Louis LaMonica and Trey Bernard, as well as some other church members, began living at the church, he discovers that there are no longer church services even being conducted, and the building had really just completely ceased functioning as a church. So in late 2005, Dr. Adrian Atzemis, who is a pediatric forensic medical specialist, she sees the two boys for therapy and also performs a full physical examination on each boy. And she testifies at the trial that both boys told her they were forced to perform sexual acts on their own father and others. Both boys said they had oral and anal sex with their own father at home and at the church. So in April of 2005, Jennifer Thomas, a forensic interviewer with Child Advocacy Center, she interviews the boys in Hammond, Louisiana, which is right outside of Ponchatoula. It's just a larger city, college town. And at that trial, she indicates that one of the boys was 18 years old when he was interviewed, and as such, his interview could not be used in court. The videotaped interview of the other boy, who was almost 15 at that time, was played for the jury. In that interview, the boy listed at least a half a dozen adult church members, including his father, who took part in that sexual abuse. Now, according to that boy, the sexual incidents occurred at his house, Trey Bernard's house, and at the church. He also said that he had sex with a dog and a very young girl. And when I say very young, y'all, I mean infant. Disgusting. The boy also went over his drawings of various sexual acts, including certain people, including himself, Louis LaMonica, and his brother. And the boy indicated that some of his drawings depicted actual events, while other drawings were products of his imagination and based on what he and his father would talk about. According to that boy, of the 55 drawings he had, approximately 22 of them depicted actual events involving sex. In July and August of 2005, that boy had several therapy sessions with a Dr. Allison McCain, who was a clinical psychologist. Dr. McCain testified at the trial that she found the boy to have a lot of depression, some anxiety and guilt, and feelings of worthlessness. The boy also told Dr. McCain that he tried to cope with his feelings with distraction and repression. He told Dr. McCain that he had been using these coping mechanisms for years to try not to think about the molestation. He also indicated that after his parents separated, the molestation stopped. Now, as we told you, in May of 2005, the defendant walks into the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office and he asked to speak to a detective, Benita Sager. And in a taped interview with Sager, he confesses to raping his sons. He also stated that at his home in Springfield, which is in Livingston Parish, very short drive to that church, he performed oral sex on his son when he was 4 to 5 years old. This sick SOB. He also began having sex with both of his sons when they were 5 or 6, he confessed. He also indicated that sexual activity involving several people occurred at Hosanna Church. And based on that information, Detective Sager, he contacts the Tangipahoa Parish Sheriff's Office, and a Detective Reginald Bryant meets with Detective Sager in Livingston Parish, and Detective Sager interviews LaMonica for a second time on that same day. And in this second interview, LaMonica provides detailed accounts of various sexual encounters at the church. He actually describes orgies at the church involving his sons and teenage members of the church, all having sex with several adult members of the church, including LaMonica. LaMonica stated that most of the time he had sex with his sons at home, but that he had sex with them as a church as well. So police search LaMonica's house and they find a notebook, and this notebook contains writings by LaMonica. They were handwritten, and the pages detailed repeated incidents of orally and anally raping his sons. LaMonica wrote about having sex with his dog, forcing his sons to have sex with each other, and raping one of his sons from the age of 3 all the way up to the age of 12. LaMonica wrote that he used money, toys, threats, and physical abuse to control and rape his sons. Now, in late 2005, a Dr. Angela Mayfield, who was owner of New Beginnings Behavioral Healthcare in Hammond, she begins counseling one of the boys. And one of the boys tells Dr. Mayfield that his father, mother, and other people at the church sexually molested him. So Louis LaMonica and his wife were in jail at that time when he was being treated, the son, one of the sons, by Dr. Mayfield. And the other son lived with his grandmother, who was Louis LaMonica's mother. Dr. Mayfield testified at the trial that within 2 months of moving in with his grandmother, the boy changed his account of being sexually abused. He told Dr. Mayfield that he made up all of the allegations of abuse and that someone at the church had forced him to say that he was abused and molested. And Dr. Mayfield testified that in late 2005 or early 2006, he said he made it all up, but that despite recanting that, she continued to treat him until 2007 because he still had a lot of other problems. Dr. Mayfield also testified that after the boy recanted, he still had symptoms that were consistent with his history of sexual abuse. Dr. Mayfield felt his symptoms, in fact, got worse, and the boy began using illegal drugs. You may ask, well, he recanted. What's up with that? That is so common. It's unbelievable, y'all. This is this boy's father, and as disgusting as that guy is, the son likely was feeling guilty about confessing this information, and so he thought, hey, if I change my story, my dad will get out of jail. As crazy as all that sounds, it happens all the time, and it's consistent with victims who are sexually abused. Now, both boys testified at trial, and they had both written about the sexual abuse that occurred. As I told you, one of the two boys, he drew pictures of the abuse. Now, they both claimed at trial that the sexual abuse never occurred and that they were forced to make these false allegations. They also both claimed that the allegations of sexual abuse that they had written about were not true, and their mother told them what to write. One brother said that the other brother also told him what to write. And Louis LaMonica, he testified at the trial that none of the sexual allegations he had confessed to or written about were true. So everybody starts denying all of this at the trial. And it's obvious in Louis LaMonica's case why he would deny this. Clinically, it's not uncommon for victims of sexual abuse that are related to the person being charged with the sexual abuse will recant statements. Obviously, it's bullshit. The evidence was overwhelming that this did occur. So Louis LaMonica at the trial also testified he was a pastor of the church, and he made Lois Mowbray his spiritual advisor. He also said that he believed that Lois was a prophet and that she spoke to God. LaMonica claimed that he made the false confessions because Lois had control over him and forced him to speak and write about things that never actually happened but may have been thought about. According to LaMonica, the notion of spiritual thought preached by Lois meant that if you think something, then it happened. LaMonica claimed that his estranged wife also made him write about sexual acts that never occurred, and that if he did not write as instructed, she would divorce him and he would never see his sons. He also testified that Lois made him remain at the church and work very long hours each day with little sleep and for no money. He also had to do work cleaning the church, and according to LaMonica, he was told the money he earned was being sent to his family. LaMonica claimed that the room in which he was staying inside of the church was locked at night from the outside with padlocks to ensure that he was locked in, and he testified that other members of the church hit him. He also claimed that they shaved his head and made him wear a dress and 2 snakes while he worked, and these were rubber snakes. And his estranged wife would see him, and that when she would see him, it would make him feel very small. He claimed that Lois did not allow him to see his wife and sons, and that if he confessed or wrote about the sexual abuse that never occurred, Lois would allow him to go home to his family. He claimed that Lois told him to go to the police and confess about the church cult involving sexual abuse of children and satanic rituals. He also claimed that Lois told him that he would have to ask police for a deal and that he would walk out of the police station with a deal. Now, a 24-year-old woman named Karen Bushy, she testified at the trial that she was a member of Hosanna Church's youth group for several years when she was a teenager. She said that she told the FBI and police there was no cult activity in the church, and she never saw any children being molested, animal sacrifices, or satanic rituals. She also told them she was never forced to have sex. Karen described it as a church cult only in the sense that Lois basically had control over everything and controlled what everyone did. And on cross-examination, Karen testified while Lois had control of everything, Lois never convinced Karen that she had to have sex with LaMonica or to write about or draw pictures of sexual abuse of herself or anyone else. Desiree Luke, who was 23 at the time, testified she was a member of the Hosanna Church youth group for several years when she was a teenager, and said that she was never forced to have sex with anyone at the church. She also told them there were no satanic rituals or cults involving sexual abuse of children at the church. She said that no one at the church ever asked her to write about having sex with people or draw pictures of sexual activity. But the evidence, y'all, was absolutely overwhelming to the contrary. And let me tell you more about Trey Bernard. So Trey Bernard and Louis LaMonica, they were the leaders of that church when a lot of these instances took place. And Trey Bernard was the youth pastor. Now, at the time of the offenses, Louis LaMonica, as you know, he was the head pastor of the church. So Trey Bernard also had children. And in March of 2003, when one of his children was just 3.5 years old, Trey Bernard separated from his wife, and he begins living with LaMonica at that church. Now, when his child was 5 years old, she disclosed to her mother that LaMonica and Bernard and LaMonica's 2 sons were, quote unquote, hurting her. And after talking to LaMonica about the allegations, the estranged wife of Bernard believed that LaMonica and Bernard had been raping and molesting not only LaMonica's kids, 2 boys, but her little girl. And this was confirmed by Dr. Adrian Atzmus when on the stand, Dr. Adrian testified that both of LaMonica's boys, confirmed that all of them were having sex with Bernard's little girl. Now, in May of 2005, Tangipahoa Parish Sheriff's Office Detective Mike DePhillips, he interviews Bernard 3 times, and Bernard claims he had placed his penis in his daughter's mouth and placed his mouth on her vagina. And on June 10th of 2005, FBI Special Agent Joseph Edwards interviews Bernard, and according to Edwards, Bernard claimed he had molested his daughter from the time she was a year old until she was 3 or 4 years old. He claimed he had put his penis in her mouth, had put his fingers in her vagina, and had also performed oral sex on her. And y'all, I'm quoting the actual court documents. Now, Bernard also lists 9 teenagers, including LaMonica's boys, that he had molested. Now, of course, in this trial, Bernard recants everything just like everybody else, but there's no recanting. All of it in all its disgustingness. So, y'all, this episode is not as detailed as what I would typically give you. It's just disgusting. So I just gave you an overview of it, and I'm going to give you the verdicts in that case, and I'm just going to wrap this one up because it's so disgusting and sick. I don't even want to talk about it anymore, to be honest. Trey Bernard, who was the youth pastor of that church, he was actually convicted of 3 counts of aggravated rape for his role in that church sex abuse scandal, and he will spend the rest of his life in prison. A jury convicted Bernard of 3 counts of aggravated rape for his role, and that's a beautiful thing. What a sick piece of shit. And the other sick piece of shit, Louis LaMonica, who was the former pastor of that church, he was also convicted of 4 counts of aggravated rape, including the abuse of his 2 sons, and he was given 4 life sentences. And that is the story of the Hosanna Church Cult Scandal. That one was heavy. I want to thank everyone for listening, sharing. Please continue to do so. Please hit that subscribe button. It'll automatically alert you when we download new episodes. And until next time, I'm Jim Chapman, your host of Exposed, Scandalous Files of the Elite. Much love.